This is a Hishu 18cm Rubik's Cube. And if there's one thing that's better than an 18cm Rubik's Cube, it's two of them. Oh, hey in there. Today I've got a couple Hishus here. These are 18cm edge length Rubik's Cubes. I really like them. I don't like the fact that they're stickerless. Never been a huge fan of that, but apart from that, I'm glad that I'm able to actually work with a big puzzle like this. I did a fused hex prism a while ago, which was a really cool puzzle that a lot of people really liked, and I wanted to do another one, but I wanted to make it out of big puzzles like these Hishus here. You might recognize this one. This is a old puzzle that I built a while ago. It was a Hishu house cube, which is a really cool puzzle and I really liked it, but the top has since moved on. I sent it over to Hungary and I kept the bottom part. I said that I was going to revisit it someday, and I may very well do so, but I'm not going to do it with this puzzle, so I'm going to kill it in this video today. But what I'm going to do is, very simply, I'm just going to make two enclosed cubes, but they're going to be much bigger than usual. Then I'm going to fuse them together, and then I'm going to do the whole hex prism modification. It's going to be a lot of fun, we're going to have some fun, and we might make a few mistakes and dirty jokes in the meantime. So, let's get started. Alright, so to get started with everything here, the first step was to take all of the center caps off both of the cubes, and then I could tighten them up so that they wouldn't turn while I was cutting them on the bandsaw. After all the center caps were off, I tightened up the puzzle using my drill, and I was careful not to tighten too much because you can very easily strip the core on this puzzle. More on that later. Now that everything was tightened, I went over to my bandsaw and I tilted the table to 45 degrees. The way I was going to be cutting the puzzles is I was going to be taking 6 edges off each of them in a band around the center. If you haven't seen my enclosed cube build video, this is basically what I'm building here, but on a much larger scale. The reason I'm making these cuts is because it gives the puzzle a hexagonal cross section along its corner axis. And after I've cut both of the puzzles, I'll be able to fuse them together, and this cross section will continue throughout both of them. After I was finished cutting everything on the bandsaw, it was time to disassemble the puzzle so that I could fill each of the pieces. I used some cardboard and some JB Weld to cap off the inside parts of each of the pieces. This would just help me with saving on epoxy sculpt, as I was going to be pretty much stuffing the pieces solid, and seeing as how this was going to be a very resource heavy modification, I wanted to cut back on the amount of resources used in any given situation. While I'm mixing up the epoxy sculpt, I might take a moment to thank Ave Studios for sponsoring this build. This build took a ridiculous amount of epoxy sculpt, even more than my 5 million subscriber play button that I made a few months ago. This would be my heaviest modification, and the majority of that weight would be right down to the epoxy sculpt that was used. So a lot of it got used during this build, and I totally wouldn't have been able to do it without the support of Ave Studios. So if you want to pick some up, I'll leave a link in the description as to where you can buy it. It's a fantastic material, and I highly recommend it for all of your puzzle modding needs. After all the pieces had been filled, I left them to cure while I dealt with fusing the two cores together. I've made quite a few videos in the past showing how to fuse two cores together. It's really just a case of meshing the centerpieces of two cores and then gluing everything in place. After I did that, it was time to reassemble the puzzle and check the turning quality, and that's when I ran into my first problem. It don't work. Here's the problemo. The screws suck and the core sucks. I've never liked the actual mechanism of the Hishu 3x3s. The only reason I use them is because what other manufacturer makes an 18cm edge length Rubik's Cube? What I'm going to do now is I'm going to disassemble the puzzle as I was already going to, and sand all the pieces down to their final dimension, or at least a dimension that I think is going to be the final dimension. And then once I reassemble it, hopefully the reduced weight on all of the pieces doesn't put so much pressure on the core and the screws, so it might make the problem go away. Alright, so it looks like it's working. I've got some of the pieces in already, as you can see. Whoop, I don't want it to fall apart on me. But as you can see, I've got the two cores here, and one of the problems that I had with them was I didn't cut away enough material, and when I did my initial test of this puzzle, it exploded on me. Now initially I thought that was because of the poor design of the core, of which is a completely different story that we'll get into later, but it was actually a problem with how far down I cut these pieces. I really just didn't cut them down far enough, and I didn't think as to what the corners were going to be doing when they came in contact with it. They were pushing up, and it caused them to catch, and eventually it just disassembled the puzzle on me. So when you're doing this kind of modification, you really want to make sure that you've cut enough material out when you do this kind of stuff. This is not just for these big mods, it's also for smaller ones as well. When I'm doing these kinds of modifications with the Chi sail, I usually don't have to worry about this, partly because the core is so much smaller and the pieces are already very rounded over, so it's not much of an issue. But anyways, I'm going to get back to this build. Now that all of the interior pieces were filled and the whole puzzle was fused and assembled, it was time to cut the pieces that would be at the top and bottom of the puzzle and then work on extending all of the areas that I needed to extend. So I started by cutting off all of the parts out of the edge pieces and the corner pieces, and I ran into a bit of a problem. I don't understand how I keep doing this. Every single time I make this puzzle, I end up making this mistake. I cut the tip off the corner and not down here where I'm supposed to. So I'm going to have to recut these corners down a lot lower. Try and avoid that and don't do what I do. I've also filled them in with some cardboard and I'm going to be stuffing them with epoxy sculpt now. There is a lot of filling in this mod. Okay, so what I'm doing here is I've just built a couple of test pieces. The reason that I've focused all of my efforts on just a couple of pieces is because I want to be able to send some measurements over to Oliver from Oliver's Stickers so that he can get some stickers cut while I'm doing the rest of the pieces. It also really helps to have a reference for when I'm making the rest of them, that way I don't waste a load of material if I end up making the same mistake on all of them. So when you're doing these big modifications, I recommend you just make one piece of any of the really big extensions, and then you can copy that for the rest of them after you've finished it. This is just a bit of a technique that I use on big projects, and I haven't really done that many of them, so it works for me now, but you know, I might be leading myself down a bad rabbit hole, but it's something that really helps for me. Building all of the extensions was really laborious, time-consuming work. I actually took an entire month off this project to think over the way that I was going to approach the extensions. A lot of it did get filmed, but not a lot of it got saved. But I was still lucky enough that I had the pieces that I had already built as a reference to mark out where to cut and sand to on all of the other pieces. Eventually, after I had all of the pieces extended out as far as they needed to be, it was just a case of sanding them all down to the final dimension, and because I was sanding on such wide surfaces, it took a lot of sanding to remove just a millimeter of material. But eventually, after I had all of the pieces sanded down, I rounded over all of the edges and I reassembled everything. Now that the puzzle was fully assembled but not painted yet, I really got a chance to test the turning quality of the puzzle. I was really happy with how smooth everything was turning, although I knew that once I painted up all the pieces, it was going to be a lot stiffer because of the contact surfaces being covered in paint. Unfortunately, this is something I can't help because the puzzle is stickerless, which means I need to add a coat of black spray paint. If the puzzle was black, I usually wouldn't bother with it, but in this particular case, there's nothing I can do about that. But regardless, I got to try some of the shape-shifting moves, and as you can see here, this is a shape-shifting puzzle. If you want to see more of the shape-shifting qualities and just the overall look of the puzzle, I'll leave a link to my original build video of the smaller version of this puzzle, which I suppose is the regular size version, since this one is so big. But anyways, I was happy with the turning, and I was happy that everything was looking good, so now it was time to disassemble the puzzle so that I could paint all of the pieces. I painted all the pieces in gloss black spray paint with a couple of coats, and then I gave it some time to dry before I reassembled the puzzle and began cutting all of the stickers. And that is how you ruin a perfectly good bench top. After everything was cured, I reassembled the puzzle and I began cutting out all of the stickers for it. Initially I wanted to get stickers cut by Oliver from Oliver's Stickers, but unfortunately that didn't pan out, so instead I cut the stickers myself, which I was pretty happy to do, since cutting stickers on a large puzzle is a lot easier than you might first think. After I finished cutting all the stickers out, here it is, the puzzle is finally complete. And that is done. This is without a doubt the heaviest and largest puzzle that I've ever built before on my channel. The second largest being the 5 million subscriber play button that I made a couple months ago. Of course it wasn't my 5 million subscribers, but it was still a pretty big puzzle. And this one definitely tops that one. So this is a really cool modification. I think it looks fantastic. It definitely looked better than I expected it was going to be. One of the problems I do have with the way it looks is these big black lines in between the pieces here. Now I could have gotten rid of them on the bottom and the top, but I wouldn't have been able to get rid of them in the center, so I figured to stay with consistency, I would leave them on the top and the bottom. But everything else is pretty fantastic. One of the only problems I have with the puzzle, apart from the aesthetics, is the way that it turns. It definitely isn't the best turning puzzle out there. How does it even turn? Like this. Oh, I don't like that sound. I've had this puzzle pop on me twice. Once on camera, as you saw before, and another off camera about half an hour ago. But anyways, if you guys like this video, then make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell, because YouTube is, well, you know how YouTube is. But anyways, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time. Just make it, no, down.